Alright, so here we go. This is probably the greatest catalog in the history of hip-hop right here. Nas definitely dropped a great album, Life is Good. I really enjoyed it. I thought, it pretty much gives the Nas fans what they wanted. I know some of the mainstream fans and some of the casual fans, Nas is kind of hit or miss with them. Nas has never really had the greatest crossover appeal, but, I really don't care. Nas definitely probably the greatest rapper of all time in my opinion, and the most consistent artist ever. I mean, he's really had a spectacular career, and I thought Life is Good was pretty much everything we could have asked for. I mean, he talked about stuff that was relevant in his life. I thought the album came from the heart. He talked about how he feels kind of like he really hasn't been doing that great of a job as a father. The song about his daughter I thought was great. His daughter's getting older. She's talking to guys that are in jail. So I thought Nas's personality and his expressiveness really came across on that track. I thought that was great. And throughout the whole album, the marriage with Khalees, talked about how stressful it was. It was a nasty breakup, and definitely sounds a lot more rejuvenated. It sounds like he's got something off of his chest. It seems like every single album people talk about, oh, Nas hasn't sounded this hungry since Illmatic. I swear to God, it seems like every single album people say that. But with this one, I definitely think it's more of a fair statement, because every single track, he sounds hungry. He sounds more inspired. And definitely, I thought the production on the album was very, very solid. I think you can make a legit case the best production on any Nas album since Stillmatic. So there we go with that. So yeah, definitely I want to talk about all the Nas albums for this video, because I'm not really a review guy when it comes to hip hop. But definitely, I'll tell you, man, definitely probably not Nas's best album, not his worst album. It's hard to say how this is going to age over time, but it's definitely like I said, Nas gave us what we all wanted, and definitely album of the year material for sure. I'd probably put it at number 2 behind OC and Apollo Brown's Trophies, which in my opinion is the best hip-hop album in years. So that's not a knock on this album at all. So all right, so let's start with Illmatic. Basically, people consider this the greatest hip-hop album of all time. It's kind of like regarded in the same light as like a Michael Jackson's Thriller. It's just one of those albums you could play over and over again. People say Nas fell off after this album, but I totally disagree with that. But, to me, it's just a humble kid from Queens, just rapping, just doing what he loves here. And, this was the chance to just show the whole world what he had. And he had a great lineup of producers, Pete Rock, DJ Premier, Large Professor, the list goes on and on and on. It's just one of those albums that's flawless. Every single track has classic lines, classic verses. I could go on and on about this album. So it's pretty well documented how great it is. That's Illmatic. In my opinion, still the greatest hip-hop album of all time. So next up we go to It Was Written. And people notice the change. I will agree with this. The hunger and the aggressiveness was not that Nas showed in Illmatic. It did not come through as clear on this album. I think the best way to compare Illmatic and It Was Written is kind of like comparing, Pulp Fiction and Jackie Brown. Like Samuel L. Jackson said, the problem with Jackie Brown was people were expecting Pulp Fiction 2. You just cannot expect Illmatic 2 with It Was Written. It Was Written was a totally different animal. You could tell it was heavily inspired by Only Built for Cuban Links. It was more of a mafioso, Italian, type of rap album, where it was, more gangster driven with the, the formation of the firm. The beats were a little bit different. I know Pete Rock was disappointed that Nas didn't reach out to him on this album. We went with more with the track masters, a little bit more poppy. You had Lauryn Hill. You had some pretty awful hooks on the song, on some of the songs. I think that's what brought the album down. But lyrically, I thought this was pretty much, a genius. I think it's probably Nas's second best album still. I mean, lyrically, I think it went over a lot of people's heads. I Gave You Power, Taken in Blood. Even the song with Dr. Dre, the lyrics were just insane. And you could even make a legit case that they were a little bit more advanced, the 95, 96 Nas, than the Illmatic Nas. But, for whatever reason, people just didn't connect with the lyrics as well as the Illmatic album. But like I said, though, I think that one of the problems with the album was the hooks. I thought the Nas's Coming hook was terrible. The Suspect hook wasn't that good. Some of the stuff with the album with Foxy Brown, I think the Affirmative Action song, you could definitely tell that was obviously ghost written for her. So the album does have a few mishaps, but I still think it's classic. I think some of Nas' best work was on this album. I Am probably Nas's. I guess It Was Written is still his most successful album, mostly because of the Lauryn Hill song. Well, with I Am, I thought the production was good, but at the same time, you could tell his affiliation with Steve Stout was kind of, he kind of made Nas sell out a little bit. There was a lot of songs where I felt he really watered it down. The song with Aaliyah, the R. Kelly sample, just a lot of poppy songs on the album, which I thought brought it down. But make no mistake about it, the album still had great production. Hate Me Now, Nas is like probably two of Nas's best singles. And, the album is still genius. There's still a lot of gems on here. Ghetto Prisoners, Undying Lev, a lot of great songs in here. But still, there's just too many songs that just, I felt like Nas was kind of out of his element. But as far as production goes, you could argue that this has probably had some of Nas's best beats on it. Nostradamus was a failure. I mean, I think a lot of it had to do with the album was kind of rushed. For whatever reason, they wanted I Am and Nostradamus to be a double album. Because of bootlegging, that couldn't happen. So a lot of the great songs that were supposed to be on I Am and Nostradamus got scrapped. And Nas had a rush and barely made the release date in November of 1999. Just, threw together an album that was kind of corny, man. A lot of the songs were crappy, man. Big Girl was crappy. Just a lot of crappy songs on this album. But still, take nothing away from the good songs. There's still enough. Lyrically, there's still enough good stuff on point, which makes it a good album for anybody else. Just for Nas standards, it just fell below his level. It's definitely still his worst album to date. But you can make an excuse. I'll blame it on the bootlegging. And for whatever reason, this album came out at the wrong time. They released this in late 1999 when The Chronic 2001 came out. Nas, Jay-Z, DMX dropped albums. I can't remember. There was so much stuff going on at the time. The album kind of got lost in the shuffle as well. So, but the album sold pretty good though. It still sold about, I think, maybe 1.5 to 2 million copies, even though it wasn't very critically acclaimed. All right, now we have Nas's return, Stillmatic. As a lot of you guys know, Jay-Z kind of attacked Nas's catalog and said he only made one hot album, which was Illmatic. So he came back with Stillmatic and pretty much shocked the world. It was definitely a better album than The Blueprint, in my opinion. And, Nas pretty much won the war. I thought this had great production. I thought he came across humble and, pretty much, regained his spot as the best rapper in the game. So that's Stillmatic right there. Next up, we have The Lost Tapes. This is a collection of some of the best stuff that was bootlegged during the I Am and Nostradamus phase. And it's some of the best Nas songs on this album. Do Rags, Papa Was a Player, Blaze of 50. I mean, there's countless classics on here. Definitely some of Nas's best work is on this album. Don't sleep on it. God's Son. I really love God's Son because, his mother was dying at the time. She actually passed away, and Nas's emotion really came through on this album. And this album had some bangers too, like It Made You Look, a lot of positive messages. I think the album kind of ran dry in the middle. That's why some people don't like it, but it had a very strong beginning and a very strong ending as well. Just a lot of songs that came from the heart on this album. All right, Street's Disciple. Anytime you release a 2-disc CD, there's going to be a lot of filler on it. But I thought this was some of Nas's most creative work. The Sekou Story, the Live Now song where he, rapped like he was, pretended he was a girl. And, definitely experimented with a lot of different things here. The tribute to Rakim, even though Rakim didn't like it, I thought that was very classy. I thought Nazareth Savage, probably one of the hardest Nas songs ever. So, and then a lot of songs where he talks about, preparing for marriage. And once again, it's a very, very mature album. It's kind of like the opening phase, and then Life is Good is kind of like the end of this phase. So definitely... I thought Street's Disciple was probably the best album of 2004, which really isn't saying much because I thought 2004 was a weak year. But there's Street's Disciple. Hip Hop is Dead. I loved Hip Hop is Dead. To me, I think someone put it the best. This is kind of like Nas, very opinionated, kind of comparing him to a KRS-One on this album, where he talks about how how the hip hop industry is kind of, fading, and his love for hip hop was dying at the time because there was so much commercial crap coming out. And I thought it was good, man. There's really not a lot that I didn't like on this album. I think some people didn't like the beats, but I thought from start to finish it was some of Nas's most creative work. and definitely, you know, not his best album. I would agree with that, but still, you know, I thought the Jay-Z collaboration was classic, and you know, Carry On Tradition is a classic song. I could go on and on. I don't know, Hip Hop Is Dead was great to me. All right, so next up we have the Untitled album. This is supposed to be called Nigger, but the album title was scratched due to controversy. You know, obviously this is more of a concept album for Nas. The racial themes were really prevalent throughout the whole album, and I just thought he had a lot of creative songs in here as well, and definitely, I don't know, man. I thought it was great. I thought it was great. You know, I thought he really followed through with a really unique and awesome album here, man. So that was the controversial Untitled album. As you can see, the slave whips there. There's scars, crazy stuff, and Distant Relatives. I thought it was good. I thought at the time it was appropriate. I think it was a nice change of pace for Nas to finally do a collaboration album with somebody. You know, pretty much not for everybody, but you know, if you want to hear Nas collaborate with Damian Marley, definitely check it out. I think it was some of the best production Nas has ever rapped over. And then we have Life Is Good. Like I said, man, it's a great album. Very mature, and I thought Nas's personality shines throughout the whole album. So there we go. That's the whole catalog. Like I said, I'm not a big hip-hop reviewer, so I'm kind of limited in what I could actually felt comfortable talking about. But here it is, Illmatic, all the way to Life Is Good.